Although the events don't take place in the eponymous town, this is a true authentic Silent Hill. All the ingredients, all the pillars that the best entries of the series stand on are here. The foggy town, descends into a nightmarish dimension, a psychologically broken protagonist, surreal and hard to interpret events, dialogues that constantly make you question reality, and monsters that reflect the hero's trauma. The story unfolds in the 1960s, in a provincial Japanese town. We play as a schoolgirl named Hinako, and we're brought up to speed rather quickly. Things at home are far from great. Her father drinks and is abusive, her mother accepts her bitter fate and silence and tries to impose the same resignation on her rebellious younger daughter. The older sister, the parents' favorite and the only person who truly understood and supported Hinako, gets married and leaves her behind. After yet another conflict with her parents, we find ourselves wandering the eerily empty streets on the way to meet with friends. But just as we reunite with them, we're attacked by the town's Foggy the Hacker.
The Haka, it has found me here.
The group is scattered, and from there, we begin to spiral down into the depth of the psychological nightmare the franchise is famous for. The game methodically shifts you between states of quiet melancholy and sharp terror, relying on a carefully calibrated balance of story pacing and atmospheric intensity. There are no cheap jump scares here, very few scripted monster pop-ups, and genre cliches are kept to a minimum. At the same time, it should be noted that this is one of the most brutal entries in the series. Some scenes made me feel genuinely uncomfortable, and while I recognize that this is a deliberate shock content designed to raise the player's heart rate, it doesn't feel out of place. In fact, it somehow fits the world organically, and in a twisted way even carries a certain aesthetic. Since each of these moments has a clear narrative or even gameplay purpose, I believe they are fully justified. As in previous installments, this is primarily a lonely journey, yet we frequently interact with other characters who are not only well developed and complex in their own right, but also serve to reveal more of Hinako herself. I found it fascinating to observe them, as well as to read notes, letters, and diaries, slowly piecing together the web of connections between characters from fragments of information. The hunger of curiosity never leaves you throughout the entire game, right up to the final credits, after which you'll feel compelled to hit the New Game Plus button for another helping. It's worth noting, however, that the story only fully reveals itself on a second playthrough. That said, I'm not sure every player will necessarily want to replay it, just for a new ending and handful of additional quests. And the reason lies within the combat system, which now revolves entirely around melee. That's not to say it's bad, on the contrary, I think it's well put together, just not well enough to carry the entire game as its only combat mechanic. If the game had included, say, even a couple of firearms with an extremely limited amount of ammo, then the current melee system, in its complementary role, would have felt far more engaging. I do understand that melee, with all its brutality and ugliness, creates a fitting contrast with the protagonist, a small, fragile schoolgirl, and heightens the horror of what's happening. But from gameplay perspective, it quickly starts to wear thin. The first third of the game is fun as you get used to the controls, but by the second third, the repetition sets in, and towards the end, the fights can even become irritating. You can carry up to 3 types of weapons, ranging from kitchen knives to sledgehammers. Each comes with the pros and cons. Knives deal a little damage but are fast, while heavy weapons like hammers or axes hit hard but are slow and eat up most of your stamina. The good news is that whatever weapon ends up in your hands, combat feels great. Strikes and slashes land with satisfying impact, thanks partially to crunchy sound effects and partially to the slight delay in animations, which adds a sense of weight. That animation delay, by the way, took me some time to get used to. When I first saw it in gameplay trailers, I thought I'd hate it in the actual game, but I was wrong. It's hard to explain, but the attack animation somewhat mirrors the enemy's own mechanical, pulse-filled movements, while the controls themselves remain smooth and responsive. You have a light quick attack, a heavy slow attack, a charged focus attack, and dodges. All consume stamina, and focus attacks also drain part of your sanity bar. The truth is, I barely used focus in the game. I toyed with it a bit at the start, it gives you a slight edge on damage and makes counterattacks a bit easier, with a brief slow-mo effect, but it never felt compelling enough to justify managing yet another meter on top of health and stamina. Maybe sanity plays a bigger role on Lost in the Fog difficulty or challenge runs, but it wasn't useful in my playthrough. To keep some balance and prevent you from beating the entire game with the same axe, a weapon durability mechanic was added. Personally, I see it as a way to compensate for the lack of firearms. No guns means no ammo management, right? So how else do you pressure the player with the fear of running out of options? That said, it's not as frustrating as it sounds. In my run, where I methodically killed everything in sight and explored every corner of the game, I only once found myself without a repair kit and left with just one half-broken pipe in my inventory. During action-heavy segments, the game reliably throws you what you critically need, whether that's a medkit, a repair kit, or replacement weapon. And if you ever find yourself low on resources and unsure if you can handle what's ahead, you can always just run past the enemies. You don't have to fight every single time. The annoying action segments are fortunately mixed with excellent puzzles and interesting, more relaxed exploration parts. For me, the puzzles struck a perfect balance between challenge, originality, and logic. Sure, there were a few fairly standard and simple ones, but there were also quite a few that made me sit back and really think, only to realize that the solution had been right under my nose all along. I just needed to look at things from a slightly different angle. One thing I'll say, it was incredibly refreshing to go through the entire game without ever needing to hunt down yet another pair of bolt cutters just to move forward. Exploration rewards you with extra resources, but often at the cost of enemy encounters. Besides valuable medkits, bandages, and repair kits, you also find a wide range of different consumables that affect stamina, sanity, or provide temporary buffs, as well as simply valuable items. With such variety, my head was spinning pretty quickly, and combined with limited inventory, you can't just pick up everything thinking I'll figure out later if I need it or not. Thankfully, you can sell all this stuff for faith points at any save point, which is exactly what I ended up doing most of the time. You can then trade faith points for a random Amamori tablet that gives you some effect, sometimes useful and often pointless. Much more interesting, however, is spending faith points on upgrading health and stamina, but for that you also need to find ammo tablets. Visually, the locations are simply stunning. This is a very beautiful game. I love how the grey streets of Ebisugaoka contrast with the red blossoms of the local curse, which, like shadows straight out of Amnesia, slowly spreads across the town and its surroundings. More than once I caught myself staring in awe at the scenery, only to suddenly realize that behind those pink flowers were hidden slabs of raw flesh. Again, a perfect balance of beauty and grotesque. And what would Silent Hill be without an incredible soundtrack? Traditional melancholic Japanese motifs are mixed with modern, dark, industrial beats. It's a haunting combination, one I'd love to experience again separately on vinyl. I also like how the game reimagined the classic static noise near monsters. You don't carry a radio or walkie-talkie, but as you approach danger, the ambient soundtrack intensifies and takes on a distorted static crackle. It's great to see that such an iconic part of Silent Hill identity wasn't lost in the move to Japan. All in all, I really enjoyed Silent Hill F. In my opinion, it's an excellent horror game and a worthy continuation of the series. Aside from its somewhat weak combat mechanics, this game is a must-play for both long-time fans and anyone who loves good atmospheric horror. Personally, I think keeping the franchise locked only in the titular town has been a bit limiting, and it is tough to keep that setting feeling fresh and original, so I'm really excited to see where the future entries will take us. And I'm also excited to see you in my next video, so I'd be thrilled if you subscribe, leave a like and drop a comment. How was it for you? This was Radio Nick, I hope you're doing great, and I see you next time.